Hello and welcome. So we got another lab, and after installing our domain controller and Windows Server 2012 for our New York office, now the requirement is to install Exchange Server 2016. And the lab says that your company is now asking you to install Exchange Server 2016 in your New York office so that users can connect directly to their Exchange server on site. You are required to install Server 2012 R2 and then install Exchange Server 2016 with below hardware requirement. Make sure you use recommended settings as below. The minimum RAM should be 4 GB, 100 GB of storage is good. Server name should be NYC EJO Exchange 01, and then the IP address is 10.10.254.61 and the subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. So if you see in the lab diagram in here, so we already set up the NYC EJO DC01, and now we have to set up the NYC EJO Exchange 01. And as you can see that this New York is connected through the internet to Sacramento lab, where we got domain controller and we got Exchange server. So most of the time the internet connections are so slow, or you're one side to another side, they're far away. So what you can do is you can set up Exchange server on your side, like for each side, so that whenever the clients wants to connect to the Exchange server, they can directly connect to the Exchange server that is on that site, like locally existing, physically existing in there. So that's a great way to make sure that when you're connecting from one side to another side, it's not gonna take any delays. But these days it is not happening like that because the internet connections are so fast. Like when I remember that when I was working for one of the enterprise networks, they were using microwave E1 connections, and those E1 connections were like 2 MB only. So the one side to another side, they were like 500 miles away from each other. So most of the time, like microwave links were just connected together. It was not internet, it was not through internet, it was like a private and secure network. So what they were doing was they were connecting one side to another side through microwave E1 connections, and that connection, the bandwidth was only 2 MB. So what was happening at that time, like on each side we had an Exchange server. We were just making sure that when users connect to Exchange server, or when user connects to domain controller, they can connect faster. If you try to just connect a user from a site that is far away, 300 miles away, and then you try to connect it to 1 MB or 2 MB of the link, which is sometimes up and down, which is not stable. So most of the time it is very difficult. When I say you should have an Exchange server in each site, that doesn't mean to say that I'm telling you that you should have that. It is because it depends on organization setup, like how good their link is, how they're connected. Is their network really important to them? Do they have like more money to just implement or an Exchange server on each environment? It is all based on your requirement. It is all based on your needs. So I gave you the example on why we were using an Exchange server on each side. So this is our lab for our Exchange server. Let's get it started by installing Windows Server 2012 for our New York Exchange Server 2016. Alright, so again, I'll right click here, new virtual machine. It is going to typical, same thing, no license. I'll just name it NYC EJO EXC01, and then browse, and I'll save it to the location where I'm saving the others. So it is going to be on New York, and then it will be NYC EJO EXC01. Press OK, and we are good with the naming. Press next. I'll just use 60 in here, but in your lab it was 100. So 60 is good enough for me, for us actually, when we are just trying to install Exchange for our educational purposes. So 30 is required for installation, another 30 is good enough for us. And I'll simply click on customize on hardware in here, and I'll make this one as 4 GB. Because 2 GB is not going to work on Exchange Server 2016. Make sure that you at least make it 4 GB so that it's gonna load and work um, the way you not the way you are going to be expecting, because the minimum requirement of RAM is 8 GB, so 4 GB is going to work, but still if you do not have any RAM, or your computer, physical machine computer, is like going to be out of RAM, so make sure you at least use 4 GB, which will work. It is now installing our Exchange operating system, so I'm gonna pause the video so that it's not gonna take our time and just recording unnecessary things. So it is installing the updates and it's gonna restart. So once our Exchange server or operating system is restarted, what we are going to do is we're going to rename the machine, assign IP address, make sure that it is connected or to our New York additional domain controller, and we can do NS lookup. Once we were able to do that, we will just join our exchange to domain controller, and then the next video will be about installing our Exchange server, making sure that we just install all the prerequisites, and as well as we once we are done with the installation, we will then do the install of our Exchange server 2016. So always make sure that you follow the naming convention, and always use the correct IP scheme, and always make sure that before installing Exchange server you just install the prerequisites and make sure that your server is going to meet or is meeting all those requirements that Exchange server needs. Because sometimes what happens is that most people, they do not go through the procedures. They just install the prerequisites, like 80% of the prerequisites, and when they start the installing of Exchange server, like and it just fails on like 80%. And then what happened is that when they try to run it again, that Exchange server will give them error. So now our server is up and running. So the first thing that I'll do is I'll go to setting of this virtual machine, and again I'll make it host only so that it will be connecting um, to our other virtual machines. If you don't do that, again it can be problematic sometimes when you are using like a machine that is connected to your physical network adapter, and that network is your office network, and you do not want any conflict. So make sure that you use host only whenever you want your virtual machines to talk to each other only, not to your physical network adapter. Alright, the server is restarted, and we can right click on the computer to rename this. The first step is the naming convention for us. So NYC EJO EXC01. This is going to be the computer name for this operating system. Restart later. I will simply go to connections, change adapter settings, properties, and then TCP/IP version 4, and the IP address is 10.10.254.61, and subnet mask is 255.255.255, And this time the domain controller IP address will be 54, not 53, because this is 54 and this is 53, but we want this New York exchange to connect to New York domain controller, not this. That's the purpose of using this additional domain controller. That's why you need to use that. But one other thing you can do is you can also use 10.10.254.53. So in case if this domain controller is down, this is going to be your alternative DNS. So that's a good way of using your two domain controllers or more than two domain controllers at the same time. So I'm going to restart this because we just renamed it, and then once we restart it, we will just join it to the domain. If you ask me that, what if you join the server to the domain without restarting? The thing is that when you rename a server or you rename a computer and you join it to the domain without restarting, it will join with the old name. It will not join with the new name. So just keep this in your mind. It is a very important point. So now the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to CMD and I will do the testing again by using NSLOOKUP. And NSLOOKUP is unknown with 54. And if I do ping 10.10.254 54, I can ping it, but NSLOOKUP is not working. So please pay attention in here because I'm going to teach you a troubleshooting in here. So unknown, which means that it is not going to work. So in order to fix that, this is always an issue with your DNS. So go to your New York domain controller and then go to DNS. Once you go to DNS, click on reverse lookup zone. And do you have an entry for 54? No, you don't. So what you can do in here is you can click here and then double click in here and update the Ptr Record, and then right click in here and say launch NSLOOKUP. See, it worked because there was no reverse lookup Ptr Record in there. That's why it wasn't working. NSLOOKUP worked. So this is a great troubleshooting for most of the people. Like, they don't know how to resolve this. I am talking about like people who are like the beginners who are trying to set up a lab. So most of the time they are really confused, like what to do now, like what's the problem. The DNS is up and running, the DNS is loading, I can see reverse lookup zone, I can see forward lookup zone, but it's still not working. So this is a great tip for those who really wants to learn this. So it is now working. The next step is to join this server to the domain, and then we will be done with this video. And I'll click on domain and I'll simply say elmjoetech.local and then administrator and then the password for your domain. Welcome. Okay, and restart now. So I'm going to restart it so that this server is going to be ready for Exchange Server 2016 installation. So I hope you have learned something, and I'll see you on next video.